The history of lynching in America. White Americans used lynching to terrorize and control black people in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Learn more about the history of this barbaric practice and how the NAACP worked to end the lynching. What are lynchings? A lynching is a public killing of an individual who has not received any due process. These executions were often carried out by lawless mobs, though police officers did participate under the pretext of justice. Lynchings were violent public acts that white people used to terrorize and control black people in the 19th and 20th centuries, particularly in the South. Lynchings typically evoke images of black men and women hanging from trees, but they involve other extreme brutality, such as torture, mutilation, decapitation, and desecration. Some victims were burned alive. A typical lynching involved a criminal accusation, an arrest, and the assembly of a mob, followed by seizure, physical torture or torment, and murder of the victim. Lynchings were often public spectacles attended by the white community in celebration of white supremacy. Photos of lynchings were often sold as souvenirs and postcards. Southern trees bear a strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Strange Fruit, written by Abel Murrow Poe and recorded by 1939 by Billie Holiday. How many people were lynched? Between the years of 1882 and 1968, there were 4,743 lynchings that occurred in the U.S., according to the records maintained by the NAACP. Other accounts, including Equal Justice Initiative's extensive report on lynching, count slightly different numbers, but it's impossible to know for certain how many lynchings occurred because there was no formal tracking. Many historians believe the true number is underreported. The highest number of lynchings during the time period occurred in Mississippi, with 581 recorded. Georgia was second with 531. Texas was third with 493. Lynchings did not occur in every state. There are no recorded lynchings in Arizona, Idaho, Maine, Nevada, South Dakota, Vermont, and Wisconsin. Black people were primary victims of lynching. 3,446, or about 72% of the people lynched were black. But they weren't the only victims of lynching. Some white people were lynched for helping black people or for being anti-lynching. Immigrants from Mexico, China, Australia, and other countries were also lynched. Allegations behind lynchings. White mobs often used dubious criminal accusations to justify lynching. A common claim used by the black to lynch black men or by the people was that black men were perceived as sexual transgressors against white women. So charges of rape were routinely fabricated. These allegations were used to enforce segregation, which a lot of black people are welcoming back, which is not a good idea. So that is why I'm reading this. So you can understand what follows with segregation is probably more than likely going to be lynching. And advanced, I'm adding this in there so that those who have been saying that they're okay to welcome back segregation, you're also welcoming back this. So in advanced stereotypes of black men as violent hypersexual aggressors. So hundreds of black people were lynched based on accusations of other crimes including murder, arson, robbery, and vagrancy. Many victims of lynching were murdered without being accused of any crime. They were killed for violating social customs or racial expectations such as speaking to white people with less respect than what white people believed that they were owed. How the NAACP fought lynching. As Black Americans had fled the South to escape the terrors of lynching, a historic event known as the Great Migration, people began to oppose the lynchings in a number of ways. So they conducted grassroots activisms, such as boycotting of white businesses, which some people are trying to do today. Anti-lynching crusaders like Ida B. Wells composed newspaper columns to criticize the atrocities of lynching, and several important civil rights organizations, including the NAACP, emerged during this time to combat racial violence. So the NAACP led a courageous battle against lynching. In July of 1916, the issue of The Crisis editor W.E.B. Du Bois published a photo essay called Waco Horror. That was featured brutal images of the lynchings of Jesse Washington. Washington was a 17-year-old black teenager who was lynched in Waco, Texas by a white mob that accused him of killing Lucy Fryer, a white woman. Du Bois was able to turn postcards of Washington's murder against the creators to energize the anti-lynching movement. The crisis circulated a circulation that grew by 50,000 over the next 2 years, and they raised $20,000 toward the anti-lynching campaign. So in 1919, the NAACP published 30 years of lynching in the U.S. That was between the years of 1889 to 1919 to promote awareness of the scope of lynching. The data in this study offers the gruesome facts by the number of the year, the state, the color, the sex, and the alleged offenses. So among the campaign's other efforts during the years of 1920 to 1938, we flew a flag from our national headquarters in New York that bore the words, "A man was lynched yesterday." The campaign turned the tide of public opinion and even persuaded some southern newspapers to oppose it because it was damaging to the South's economic prospects. We also fought hard for anti-lynching legislations. So in 1918, Congressman Leonidas Dyer of Missouri first introduced his anti-lynching bill known as the Dyer Bill into Congress. So the NAACP supported passage of the bill from 1919 onward, though it was defeated by the Senate filibuster. So the NAACP continued to push the federal anti-lynching legislation into the 1930s. And so national lynching rates declined. That was in 1930s, a trend of the NAACP Executive Secretary Walter White attributed to anti-lynching activism, which shifts in the public's opinion and the Great Migration. So the first full year without a recorded lynching occurred in 1952, the lynching of Emmett Till. Shall we go into that? So the tide may have turned against lynching, but the white supremacy and violence continued to terrorize black communities. So in 1955, a 14-year-old Emmett Till was brutally murdered for allegedly flirting with a white woman. This is the segregation. So you can't look at white people, you can't speak to white people, you can't go in white spaces, and you definitely can't eat where you want to eat, you can't go to the theaters where you want to go, you can't live where you want to live, and you can't talk to white people the way you want to talk to them if you get upset because they said or looked at you or done something that you didn't agree with. And what will follow is probably more than likely brutality, or maybe even worse, lynching. So when you welcome, and this is me adding this in here, if you welcome back segregation, you're welcoming all of this back. So that's for those of you people out there who think segregation is the way to go, and it isn't. And I'm talking to My black brothers and sisters who think segregation might be the way to go, think again, because it is welcoming other things in the world that you don't want. So it goes on to say that Till's murder and subsequent injustice deeply affected the black community and galvanized a young generation of black people to join the civil rights movement. That's where it started. The NAACP declared Till's murder a lynching. Southeast Regional Director Ruby Hurley, Mississippi Field Secretary Medgar Evers, Amzie Moore, President of Bolivar County Branch in Mississippi, initiated the homicide investigation and secured witnesses. So an all-white jury acquitted the two men that were accused, who later bragged about their crimes in the magazine article. Basically, they bragged about their crimes, and I'm saying this because they didn't feel like they were going to have any repercussions or consequences for what they did, because there's segregation that is law. Think about what you guys are thinking about. You're not really thinking clear enough what this is opening the floodgates for. So Mamie Elizabeth Till Mobley, Emmett Till's mother, decided to hold an open casket funeral to put her son's brutalized body on display for the world to see. So Jet magazine published the photos of his body in the casket along with the headline, "Negro Boy that was killed for wolf whistling," causing national outrage among black and white Americans alike, helping to catalyze the civil rights movement. So it goes on to say the modern day lynchings, you might think of lynchings as disgraceful, barbaric practice from the past, but they continue to this day. In 1998, James Byrd, he was chained to a car by 3 white supremacists and dragged to his death in the streets of Jasper, Texas. In 2020, Ahmaud Arbery was fatally shot while jogging near Brunswick, Georgia. We know that story. And this time, the 3 white men charged with the killing Arbery claimed that he was trespassing. The videotaped death of George Floyd was a modern-day lynching. Floyd was killed in a broad daylight by a police officer, Derek Chauvin, who held Floyd down with a knee on his neck for more than 9 minutes. Lynchings like these should not be part of American society today, just as they should not have been 100 years ago. NAACP will continue to fight back against white supremacy and violence and demand that people responsible, including the law enforcement officers, be held accountable. Do you know what they're doing today? So, I'm going to tell you 3 things that I've read recently that I discovered they're trying to bring back, along with this segregation. That's one of them. They want to bring back child labor. They're debating in Florida, should they make kids work? So some of you people who don't like people saying anything to your kids, and we know who those people are, some of them, you don't like anybody disciplining your kids. Well, guess what? How about your kids having to go to work and then bringing that back? Here's the other thing that they're trying to bring back, other than segregation, are things they're trying to do. Let's say that for the better words. They're trying to cut Section 8 because they claim that they are running out of funds, and we know who that's going to hurt if we don't have any subsidized living programs for some people who probably need them. And these are some of the people that might be making these videos saying bring back segregation, and they do not know what they're talking about. The other thing that they're looking at doing is they're also looking at, and I've heard some videos going around that they had Elon kind of looking at the idea of pardoning Derek Chauvin, who had the knee in George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes. So that's the birth of opening the floodgates for lynching again. So if they change the laws and they bring back the Alien Act, which we have been looking at that, and they bring back segregation, that means they bring back everything horrible that comes with it. It isn't Oh, we're going to live free like free bird black people and have a Wakanda kingdom. I think not. You're going to end up going back into a situation you know nothing about because you've enjoyed the freedoms of what these people before us fought for, marched for, cried for, probably got killed for, and maybe they were lynched. Now you're opening that door again, that Pandora's box, that ugly demon. Those postcards. Take a look at the lynching postcards. Take a look at whose religion, white Christian nationalist religion, some of those Ku Klux Klan people follow that. Take a look back in time and actually see the truth for what it is. Watch your mouth, what you say you're asking for, because you might get something you don't want. Cuts to Section 8. The only people that they have to go through is Congress. If Congress cuts Section 8, housing, these states will suffer. Housing Choice Voucher Program helps 2.3 million households pay rent. Biden has called for small increases to the program, while GOP leaders are eyeing cuts that will hit some states especially really hard. So you think rent being high is an issue? Well, look out. Homelessness will quadruple if they start this again. And so I'm just kind of panning through this. Housing Choice Voucher Program. And so you see they have a map here. And if you want to look at for yourself, you can see for yourself. It's all over in social media and in the superhighway of social media. You can look it up that they are looking, and it says they have been sounding the alarm. Low Income Housing Coalition have been sounding alarm that the Republican-controlled Congress may renew efforts to cut public assistance programs. Now, I've heard some people say, oh, it really hinders black and brown people, but there are people who it has helped get on their feet until they get a better paying job or until they're able to get into better living situations. So, if situations like that are of need for temporary assistance, that's great. Some people, however, yes, you get people who abuse situations. And then there's some situations where people have health issues. They might be one paycheck away from being homeless. They might have been homeless, and that was their saving graces to get these programs. So watch what you say before you welcome all of this stuff back. Florida wants to loosen the child labor laws. I just want you to take a look. This is DeSantis. He is the governor of Florida. He is debating with others about loosening the laws of child labor. Why? Because of the loss of migrants. So just take a random guess at who those kids might be that might have to go back to work at some grueling work. Working in fields. What does that sound like? And guess whose kids might be doing it? Probably the black and the brown kids. And the poor whites. Florida is looking at possibly loosening some child labor laws to replace undocumented workers. These states have been penalizing employers, hiring undocumented workers, leading to businesses struggling to fill jobs that are often paid poorly and viewed as undesirable. Both Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Republican-led legislatures are now looking at children as the possible solution to the issue, according to CNN. So, watch your mouth. before you welcome all of this back, because you don't know what you're talking about, because you don't read history, you don't know what you're talking about, because you don't realize that it might be your kids they send out there working in the fields. It might be you that they might be trying to lynch because you don't like what somebody said to you, because you can't go to that movie theater, you can't live in that neighborhood, you can't go to that park, you can't go to that shopping center to buy those clothes, you can't go around the corner, you can't drive down that street because that's the white neighborhood, and you might get talked to nasty. They might call you some words. You don't like it, you say something, you might get lynched, and they might not be even held accountable for it. So welcoming back segregation that's what you're welcoming back. Think about what you're welcoming back before you speak.